Don't believe the propaganda. The videos popping up of smiling moms standing, linking arms saying no to Trump's stormtroopers. The videos are easy to find, easy enough. You can just go out and pull them up. Unfortunately, I can only show you certain things here on YouTube, but a lot of videos are on YouTube and Twitter, and you need to watch them, and you need to share them. I've talked a lot about civil war, and a lot of people, we argue about what it really means. Are we really in a civil war? Is that even possible? It would require so much more than we're seeing now. And I know a lot of people have already rolled their eyes as soon as I said it. Yesterday, we had the 54th, perhaps, night of insurrection in Portland. I can't call it a riot. You know why? According to a reporter from Bellingcat, who was on the ground posting videos, at some point, the far left insurrectionists, extremists, whatever you want to call them, actually breached federal courthouse property, breaking the door in and attacking federal agents. You want to get into an argument about peaceful protesters and the federal agents coming out into the streets? Fine. You want to tell me that we have reporting from Bellingcat saying that these people breached the doors, entering federal jurisdiction and attacked federal agents? We got a whole other ballgame on our hands. So I ask you now, as we're talking about, we're going to be talking about the extremism and the dramatic escalation of the previous night. You tell me what you want to call it. When the state is suing the federal government in support of these extremists, when moms and dads come out and join in the chaos. And yes, there's video of this. You can just pull it up on Google and Twitter. What do you call it? When there's no police stopping these violent groups that have been besieging a federal courthouse now for, 2 months? Over a couple of months? And are throwing explosives, commercial grade fireworks. Even before the feds came out and made arrests. Even before they arrested anybody with their, rented vehicles. That they were attacking this federal course. Tell me what you call it. When the state is defending and providing resources to sue the federal government's law enforcement, clearing the way for fanatics to break into the federal courthouse and attack federal officers. What do you call it? I don't know. Does everybody in Portland agree? No, I don't know. But I'll tell you, the media has claimed that it's not really all that bad in Portland. Right-wing media is making it out to be more extreme. In response to some of these attempts by the media to pretend like everything happening in Portland is just a peaceful protest. In fact, some far left sympathizers have straight up said, no, it isn't. We take credit for what we've done. One reporter said the actions of starting a fire in the Portland Police Association building was a clever and deliberate act and one of the greatest victories for the activists. That's coming from one of the reporters on scene. But the mainstream press will tell you nothing is happening. Don't listen to the right-wing media, they say. I'm going to show you the BBC, who says, here's a bunch of photos and videos of the ongoing violence. It's hard to know what's true. I'm not down there. So I'll defer to Bellingcat. They got a reporter down there who, in my opinion, seems rather sympathetic to the extremists. And sure, he's allowed to. But he's taking credit for this stuff. He's praising it. In fact, he is straight up saying they breached the courthouse. He calls the holes that the federal agents fire out of murder holes. And that's kind of a crazy thing to me that the federal officers have barricaded themselves in a building. They're refusing to abandon it. And the far left has actually breached this building. Sounds to me like insurrection, civil war, because the state is essentially sponsoring this. I called this in a previous segment a de facto letter of marque. It's a reference to, they used to, privateers, private ships that would attack the enemies of the crown. It was a very common thing in the colonial era, whatever. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to be a historian, but the general idea I'm trying to convey is that the Portland police have literally said they are not engaging the riots. Well, they said protesters. They're not. They're out. They've left it. They're leaving it alone. The feds are on their own. Why? Because the state told them to do it. When the feds came out and started making arrests, the AG of Oregon filed a lawsuit against the federal government to stop them. The feds retreated back into their building, where the far left returned, this time with support from the state and the police standing down. And I tell you this, breached the courthouse. I've seen a lot of people ask, why don't the feds just leave? I made this argument before. My opinion was the feds should stay off the streets and let Portland have, what they voted for. The citizens of Portland often refuse to return indictments against these people. When you see the moms and dads coming out and joining the extremists, it looks like regular civilians in Portland are attacking federal officers and laying siege to a federal courthouse, trying to burn it down. And I kid you not, according to Bellingcat reporter Robert Evans, at some point the protesters, quote, tore open the doors of a federal courthouse and then beat back the agents inside. Throughout the night, Evans shared a series of tweets and videos about the incidents that occurred during the protest, including how people reportedly forced federal agents back inside their courthouse. Evans tweeted the crowd is now throwing bottles at their hands as they try to shoot through, quote, murder slits in a wooden structure built around the courthouse to protect it. Bellingcat has written up this really long outline of what's happened and how we've gotten to this point. And although this reporter, Robert Evans, seems sympathetic to the far left, he doesn't pull his punches. He says straight up that this was a medieval siege on the building with commercial grade explosives. Commercial grade fireworks, mortar shells. I don't know what you want to call it. See all these people? Thousands of people? Some people are saying that gassing the moms backfired and now thousands of people have shown up. Sure, call it whatever you want, but it's just general escalation. If the far left keeps attacking the courthouse and the federal officers defend themselves and try to make arrests, and that results in an escalation, what would you expect when the state is supporting the insurrection? Civil war, perhaps? Here's what I think. The feds have the option to just leave like they're demanding. At first, they said, stay off the streets. That's what the mayor said. Stay off our streets, stay inside your courthouse. Okay, the feds were in the courthouse. What happened? They broke inside. Now, what can they do? State support of the insurrectionists would, and now with their so the state is supporting them, as I said. They're now demanding the feds leave entirely. Just get out. What happens next? If the federal officers leave the courthouse and it is ransacked and taken over by extremists, including regular citizens, civil war? What do you want to call it? Insurrection? I don't know. Fanatic outburst? I don't know. I'll tell you this, and I want to stress this point as I now go through what's going on here with some tweets. When the state begins to support this, check it out. Portland police do not engage crowds during the night. They straight up say Portland police were not present during any of the activity described. Portland police did not engage with any of the crowds and did not deploy any CS gas. This is from July 20th, and I believe they're referencing the incidents of the night of the 19th, so a couple days ago. I highlighted this in a previous segment, but I want to show you this to point out the Portland police are standing down. The fanatics, including regular old civilians who have teamed up with them and are laying siege to this building, have been given a clear path to attack the feds. The state is suing in support of this group against the feds. Politicians from Oregon are supporting these people, calling them peaceful protesters, and the craziest thing is Nancy Pelosi as well has condemned the executive branch's actions in defending the federal courthouse, calling these people stormtroopers. And she has an interest in taking the White House. Well, she's a Democrat, but she's also, I believe, third in line. Let me show you some of what's happened. And then I want to show you how this isn't the fault of the feds. You can consider sharing this if you think this information is important. I do think it's fair to point out I'm not on the ground, and I defer to people like Robert Evans. And all of my opinions are based upon his reporting and other reporters on the ground. So while many people are sharing photos and videos of moms singing songs and clapping their hands, calling it peaceful and blaming the federal officers, I defer to Bellingcat. And let me show you. Here's a tweet. He says, Robert Evans, I am hearing conspiracy theories that the Portland police lit their own union building on fire. This is untrue. I was there. The burning of the PPA was a deliberate and very intelligently executed action by disciplined activists, according to a reporter on the ground. He said the burning of the Portland Police Association building was a well-coordinated and executed action. With minimal casualties by protesters, the PPA is trending nationwide. This might be the single biggest win of any action in the Portland uprising so far. He calls it an uprising. Well, I think he calls it an uprising because he's got a favorable view. I don't care for the federal government, the protesters in this regard. I just think the facts are the facts. The feds are being besieged now, and I'm gonna show you what Robert Evans himself has said and defer to him. He said this early this morning, tonight the citizens of Portland A mix of moms and dads and black bloc and activists tore open the doors of a federal courthouse and then beat back the agents inside. Quote, quelled. That's what he said. Moms and dads and black bloc and activists of all stripes tore open the doors of a federal courthouse and beat the agents inside. Here's another photo. He says, Monday on Portland, where you can eat ribs, light bonfires, and repeatedly assault a federal courthouse. I'll take his word for it. He's there. We can see there's no federal officers in these photos or videos, but these people are attacking the barricades, trying to break them down. In one video he posted, they actually pop open one of these slits. It's like a hole prop set up in the barricade that the police can look through and fire less lethal rounds through. Well, they can fire anything they want through it. Robert Evans tweeted, one of Portland's lessons for the left is that sometimes if you meet liberals in the right way, they wind up wanting to break down the doors of a federal building with sledgehammers. Do you want to call it a civil war yet? Can we? I hope you're ready. I hope you've taken precautions to protect yourself and your family, because we're hearing amid all of this. I did a segment earlier. Tucker Carlson is concerned, and he said the New York Times is planning to release information on where he lives. Why? Probably get him hurt, I suppose. Now, of course, we're seeing the far left and the media deny this. But take it from a guy on the ground who's posting videos from on the ground, who's written this. Bellingcat has, this is Robert Evans, he's written up a very long post explaining how we got to this point. In my personal opinion, I think he's biased, but I do believe he is being 100% honest. My opinion may clash with his. My choice of words may clash with his, but I think he's doing a great job, to be completely honest. He's not hiding what they're doing. He's look at this. He says it was a deliberate and very intelligently executed action by disciplined activists. Call them what you want. I would call them insurrectionists, fanatics, something else. But he is telling us straight up, no, they did this. They knew what they were doing. They knew why they were doing it. He said they have teamed up with liberals, moms and dads, to tear down break down. What does he say? I want to make sure I get it right again. Tonight, they tore open the doors of federal courthouse and beat back the agents inside. He is straight up telling us. Now, it may be propaganda because of his bias. Call it whatever you want. But as long as we know what's going on, that they're actually doing this, I'll respect his work. Here's what he writes about July 4th. This is very important context for what's happening in Portland. Again, if you'd like to share this because you think people need to know, I personally find this stuff important. On July 4th, Portland's 39th consecutive night of protests, more than 1,000 people assembled in front of the Justice Center and federal courthouse downtown. They began launching dozens of commercial-grade fireworks into the concrete facades of both buildings, prompting a response from the police and federal agents inside both buildings. Let's stop. The feds were inside, not engaging, not instigating, not starting anything. They started lobbing dozens of commercial-grade fireworks at the buildings. Thus, the feds responded. What followed resembled nothing so much as a medieval siege. The windows of both government buildings had been covered in plywood weeks ago after the first riots. Officers inside fired out through murder holes cut in the plywood, pumping rubber bullets, pepper balls, and foam rounds into the crowd, while the crowd formed phalanxes of shield bearers to protect the men and women, launching fireworks back in response. Federal agents dumped tear gas into the street, but Portland's frontline activists had long since lost their fear of gas. The feds and the police were eventually forced to sally out with batons to drive the crowd back. Boom! There it is. The feds did not come out and instigate. The far left has repeatedly tried to lay siege, his words, not mine, to this building with commercial-grade fireworks. A man who is on the ground and who has said, here's what they're doing. It's deliberate. It's intelligent. You can call him a liar. You can call him whatever you want. He seems rather sympathetic. He says, I reported on the fighting in Mosul back in 2017. And what happened that night in the streets of Portland was, of course, not nearly as brutal or dangerous as actual combat. Yet it was about as close as you can get without using live ammunition. At times, dozens of flashbangs and fireworks would detonate within feet of us over the course of a few minutes. My ears rang for days. Afterwards, my hands shook. I could not write for days. Wow. He's saying it's as close as you can get without live ammunition. So I'll ask you now, how close are we to whatever you'd want to call it? Some people say insurrection. Perhaps. But state resources are defending these groups. State resources are targeting the federal government. And Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats are using this against Trump. The federal agents did not instigate. The federal agents are being attacked inside their building. The state is supporting these individuals. The police have backed down, and federal level politicians are targeting the executive branch in an effort to gain power of the government. I'm sick of having a semantic argument over this. We have very clearly two different factions, well-resourced, fighting over control of the government, though we're waiting for an election that both sides say will be fake. Both sides will say mail-in voting is broken or that China is influencing the election. They've already done it. The reports have come out in the New York Times saying straight up, we can't count these votes. California, 100,000 votes not counted. 65,000 votes disqualified because of a failure of the Postal Service. And now we're hearing in New York City, they still can't certify the result of a mail-in election. What do you think is going on? When the state is supporting this with legal resources, Nancy Pelosi uses it to try and take power in the federal government. Call it whatever you want. It's as close as you can get to Mosul without using live ammunition. This guy must be off his rocker, right? He's showing us videos and photos of it happening. A guy who's actually reported there, and who, as far as I can tell, has been completely honest about what's going on. Look what he said. The whole situation prompted the first major federal response to Portland's nightly protests. It started in the media, with CBP Commissioner Mark Morgan going on Fox News to denounce local activists as criminals. Listen, when you turn on the media and they say what I say, insurrectionists, fanatics, criminals, you see the language we choose to use. Why? Because they're the ones instigating this. Look at the language Bellingcat chooses to use, or other members of the media. Peaceful protests, activists. That language is the dividing line of whose side you're on. So when I see photos and videos from people I know, and they're claiming that Trump's stormtroopers are attacking, it is fake news. Take it from this guy. And there's other reporters calling it out. But look, whether or not you choose to believe what you want to believe, this guy is saying straight up, the first major federal response, it started with Fox News calling them criminals. Yeah, I would call them criminals. The Portland police have stood down. Now, what's interesting about this post is that it started with Portland police actually trying to stop the riots. They eventually gave up. Portland police have stood down and are allowing this group to attack a federal courthouse and actually breach its doors. Civil war. It could stop, you know. Do I think it will? I don't, because the rhetoric is getting insane and the violence has been escalating. Portland had this ongoing battle, whatever you're going to call it, for 54 nights. CNN would tell you to go back to sleep. Calm down. There's nothing happening. There is no war. There is no, what was it? I'm watching Avatar because it just came out on Netflix. There is no war in Ba Sing Se, if you get the reference. The light flickering saying, calm yourself. Nothing's happening. The streets of Portland are safe and fine. There's no siege. But it's because they're attacking the federal courthouse to boot the feds from Portland. If the state of Oregon doesn't recognize the authority and jurisdiction of the federal government, what do you call it? Up to you, I suppose. He says, I take some issue with this. Here's the quote. These are not protesters. These are criminals who got together and actually brought weapons. They brought shields. They brought frozen water bottles, rocks, lasers, weapons with the intent to destroy a federal building and harm law enforcement officers. Evans says, I take some issue with this because there was never any real chance of either the federal courthouse or the Justice Center being seriously damaged by fireworks. Both buildings are, at this stage in the protest, essentially fortresses. Before federal agents opened fire, activists in the park actually seemed much more interested in shooting fireworks at the Justice Center to provide a show for their friends incarcerated inside. Fair point, I think. I don't think these fireworks are actually going to cause significant damage to the outside of the building. But what do? The fireworks will cause damage, and the buildings are barricaded. But what do? Sit back? They've breached the courthouse now. So I don't know if he wrote this yesterday and now they've breached the courthouse. What would you say? Perhaps the reason they started firing at the insurrectionists, whatever you're going to call them, fanatics, was because, not necessarily because of the commercial grade fireworks, but because they were trying to breach the courthouse. There's videos posted by Evans himself and by Andy Ngo and many others going back quite a ways where they're trying to break the barricades down. And there's actually a video of them tearing the wood off of the barricades, protecting the glass. There's a video of a man with a fire extinguisher trying to bash the glass. And Evans himself notes this right here. You see, they claimed it was a pipe bomb. But what Evans says is that he talked to some of the activists, and they said it was actually more likely to be used for breaking windows. Here's what he says. You may notice that this bomb has no hole for a fuse. When I showed this to activists on the street, most of them suggested this was probably a device for breaking windows. That seems very likely now that we have the charging document from that weekend. The man with the machete is Andrew Faulkner. He is charged with assaulting a federal officer by shining a laser pointer in their face. Neither he nor any other Portland protester have faced any charges related to the possession of a pipe bomb. The narrative emerging was that this was some kind of pipe bomb. What he says specifically is that he believes it's very likely, and activists have told him it was a device for breaking windows. Perhaps the federal agents have started firing at the protesters because they were attempting to breach the courthouse, which apparently now he says they've done. So I'll tell you this. The Democrats want to win. The media wants the Democrats to win. Tucker Carlson is going to be, potentially be, partially doxxed. They're accusing him now of misconduct and harassment, a lawsuit. Every stop is being pulled out because we are in some kind of fourth generational civil war, and it's escalating very quickly into a hot war. And it's happening in Portland. I hope you've taken precautions to protect yourself. I know a lot of people are fleeing big cities, but when you literally have the government of Oregon supporting the insurrectionists with state resources to sue the feds, to stop them from going after, from defending themselves, and then citizens, civilians, not even in Black Bloc, join the fray to breach a courthouse and attack federal agents. If the federal agents leave, as many have suggested they do because they're not wanted there, the federal courthouse will fall in 2 seconds. I absolutely believe that would be the case. That's why I don't think it's necessary for that to happen for us to consider this civil war. Now, I covered the start of the Euromaidan thing in Ukraine. It was the end of 2013 into 2014, and a large protest erupted in what's called Maidan in Kiev, Ukraine. When I was there, it was a protest, and the police were fighting with a lot of these people. Eventually, I believe the president, I'm not sure if it was a prime minister, I think it was the president of Ukraine, was ousted and fled. They started calling it a civil war because in the east of Ukraine, separatists started taking territory and fighting back. The last time I was there a few years ago, I was told that no one uses that phrase anymore, and they just call it like a separatist movement, a violent separatist movement, because for the most part, they've quelled the civil war. In the beginning, many people were calling it a civil war because the eastern Ukraine was siding with Russia, basically, and fighting against different territories. But as these individuals started losing ground, it became a separatist movement. Call it whatever you want. But it's not just Oregon, and that's the issue. We have now seen the emergence of state sponsorship. I know it's loose, and you could argue I'm being a little hyperbolic. When the feds came out to arrest these people attacking the courthouse, the state is challenging their jurisdiction. So we're in the court territory. Nancy Pelosi took the side of the far left insurgency, whatever. And now the Democrats are trying to take control of the government through the electoral process, of course. But I don't think November is going to be a peaceful transition of power, especially with this going on. This has been going on for 54 nights. It's not going to stop. We saw riots in Seattle. We've seen a state of emergency declared in Utah and in Georgia in the past couple of weeks. Trump is sending more federal agents to other places, dare I say, to quell the escalation of violence. Meanwhile, Democratic politicians are attacking him, saying it's wrong. The federal government is deploying federal agents to stop insurrection across the country. Call it whatever you want. I'll see you all at 4 p.m. over at timcast.net. Thanks for hanging out.